You're listening to Content Logistics, a podcast for B2B marketers looking to build a content engine that drives revenue. In each episode, Camille Trent interviews the marketers behind the best content marketing flywheels and uncovers the tactical aspects of content production, from first draft to first customer.
Hello, and welcome to the first ever episode of Content Logistics. I'm your host, Camille Trent, and this episode is brought to you by my good friends Tristan and Justin at Motion. So I've been wanting to launch a podcast like this for a while, and I would not have been able to do it by myself. And so thanks to their expertise, this is actually happening. So my first my first guest on this episode is Justin Simon. He's the global SEO and content lead at TechSmith. So if you've ever heard of Snagit or Camtasia, those are both TechSmith products, very good ones. I use one of them. So Justin, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. So we met a few months ago, and I think I found you through your LinkedIn content. And what stood out about it was there's all sorts of content marketers that are talking about content and talking about SEO and how they make the content and how they make more of the content. What was different about your approach was, why don't we just take the content we already have, because we built up so much content, we're in this hamster wheel of content. Why don't we take the content that we have and we find better ways to redistribute it or just refresh it, right? And so that was the thing that stood out to me about you and kind of what we started connecting on. And so I just wanted to talk through that. So first off, if you can tell everyone a little bit more about your role at TechSmith and what you're responsible for, and then we can go into those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I run the content team at TechSmith that and really run content strategy as a larger portion of my role. I have a small team of both full-time and interns, and we are sort of responsible for, like I said, all of the content we create. So that is everything from blog posts to YouTube videos to lead gen pieces to any and all social content. All of that stuff is housed under my team. And I've been doing that for a couple of years now. It's super fun.
Okay, awesome. And then, so I know that you guys sell to B2C because it's your products are very focused on creators, right? Do you guys also sell to B2B?
Yep. We definitely sell within enterprises and have lots of people across all different size companies, from small businesses to large enterprises in the Fortune 500 that use our products.
Okay, interesting. So this will be fun because you can really talk to that B2C part, the B2B part. Like, it's a good case study for all content marketers out there. So let's talk about like one of the first posts that I saw. It was basically this decision tree of when do you need to create new content versus refresh your old content, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like very simple in theory, and then very hard to execute, as all content marketers can relate with. So how do you know when it's time to create new content versus refresh old content?
Yeah, I think there's this ever growing sort of dichotomy and difference between what's working and versus what you think you need to do as a content marketer. And if we really looked at, and that's kind of where, and I put that stuff out there mainly to challenge myself just as much as to challenge other people on LinkedIn. But, as I had started to grow our team and understand what we were doing, and, as I start becoming responsible for what people are doing and what we're working on and how that actually impacts the business, you start to try to really focus on what's actually working. And I just came to the realization that we were trying to create so much, and that what wasn't always moving the needle. And so I would ask those questions like, why? Like, do we really need to be creating new content all the time? And then what happens to all this, new content, and then what happens to all the old stuff that we have? Like, did that suddenly go stale? Is it suddenly bad content? And so we actually made a dedicated effort to look back at our old content and see what was performing and what was actually converting, and then re-update all that content. And so it doesn't sound super sexy. It doesn't sound fun and new. And hey, we're going to put out this giant new ultimate guide, or we're going to go do this and that. As far as like the typical content marketing side, it sounds boring to say, yeah, we're going to put a lot of effort into updating old blogs. Like that sounds so boring. But then after like a 10-week span, and you start to see the results pour in, it just became so clear that it's like, nope, that's what we need to be doing from now on.
Yeah, so how did those results compare to what you were doing before, right? Like, because before you're just doing the content creation, I assume you're on some sort
Yeah.
of calendar. So kind of what were those results that you're seeing that were so surprising?
I mean, they were pretty astronomical results in terms of like increase in page views. And the reason it starts to make sense when you break it down, because we took already well-performing posts that were just stale. And so, maybe they were at one time ranking 1, 2, 3, and now we're ranking 4, 5, 6, or they were showing up for X amount of keywords and now they're showing up for a few less. And so it's like, okay, what does it take and times change. What does it take to make something that was relevant in 2019 relevant in 2021? A lot of things have changed. And so just to refresh that content, re-update it, tell Google, hey, we updated this nice new content. You should go check it out. So yeah, it seems it was like, so apparent after we did it that I was like, why weren't we doing this before? Because it was so effective. Because there's nothing wrong with starting new content, but every time you're starting new content, it's a fresh new thing. There's no backlinks.
So there's benefits to both, right? To creating new content, being up on what's current, and then to updating the content that you already had. And so you'd kind of said before of like that 0 to 1 is so hard. And so most of the time it makes sense to just look at what you already have, right? So tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, and it all depends on where you're at. So like a company like TechSmith, we have a pretty big reservoir of the content that we're able to pull from. So we've been creating content for years and years and years on our blog. So if you don't have a giant reservoir, like maybe not, but even so, like I was thinking about this yesterday. If you created one piece a week in 2020, you would now have 52 pieces of content that you can go update. And a lot of companies are putting out at least one piece of content a week in some way, shape, or form. And so I think, yeah, the ability to go back and say, I've already put a huge amount of thought, most likely, into the strategy of previous pieces of content. That strategy didn't go away. Those are still the same users that I want to engage. Those are still the same people I want to create, or those are the same people I want to create content for. And so how can I take that existing content and make it better and maximize the attention that's already there, or the demand that's already there coming in for that particular piece of content?
Yeah, so this is going to be interesting for people that, are maybe at smaller startup companies and don't have that backlog of content. So at what point, should they audit their content? Do you think that you need like a year's worth of content, like you're saying, before you start exploring like this avenue, or is it sooner than that?
Yeah, I mean, it probably depends. I mean, you typically want to be always looking at, if the less content you have, the easier it is to manage. So I have 20 posts. It's pretty easy for me to kind of go through those 20, see where they're ranking, see how much traffic they're getting, and then pick maybe the 1 or 2 from there. The more you get, the harder it becomes to manage. But I think at a minimum, it's a great exercise at the end of maybe a Q4 to go through in maybe the slow period before the holidays begin and just start auditing your content and saying, okay, what needs a refresh heading into Q1, of the next year, and try to frame that out. It's just an easy way to kind of frame that up. If you don't have the amount or the want to do it every, 3, 6 months on a quarterly basis, to go in at least once a year and check out your content and make sure that it's up to date.
Yeah, I like that approach for a few different reasons, because as a content leader, you should also be, showing what you've done for that year, right? Like you already should be auditing the content and saying, these are the results that we've seen. This is quantitative, this is qualitative. And so you're assessing what we've already done, but then you're taking that data and you're saying, okay, based on this, like now I can make decisions for the next year. And by the next year, you want to be hitting the ground running, right? And so being able to take all of that and use that for your decision making, I think is really smart. And then the other thing that you said that I kind of wanted to go back over on is, you said that you look at well-performing content first, right? And so I look at that as kind of like the low-hanging fruit, rather than like trying to, again, maybe not take something from 0 to 1, but take it from like 0.01 to 1 is going to still be harder. And so is that how you look at it? Are you saying, okay, this is going to be the easiest thing, for us to move across the line? And so you go from things that are already performing well. And by already performing well, are you thinking, page 1 rankings?
Yeah. Usually if I go through and look at our list of content, there's usually either page 1 rankings, or there's a couple different ways you can think about it. So you can think about it. I want to take and maximize all of my stuff that's, page 1. And then how do I, improve that? And then there's like, if maybe you've got the number 1 listing, but we all know like SERPs, right? And they're crowded and they're a mess. You have ads, you have YouTube videos, you have this, you have that. So it's like, okay, I rank number 1, but I'm like way down the page. Why? Why is my click-through rate so low and I rank number 1? So what are the other factors that we can do? Okay, maybe we can make a YouTube video that'll accompany that topic. Okay, cool. Now I just gained more space in the SERP. So like there's ideas like that to like maximize from a content perspective. But then absolutely next level stuff is like looking at depending on what your goal set is. So if you have a top of funnel piece where you want to try to get people in, maybe check out your product or check out maybe a content upgrade piece or something along those lines, making sure you have goals set up around that and analytics to be able to track that and say like, oh, okay, like my conversion rates or my click-throughs and conversion rates from this piece to this piece is X. How do I get more of that? Because there's 2 ways you're going to increase. You're going to either bring in more people into that, or you can take the existing people who are coming in and convert them at a higher rate.
Right. And so to make that decision, do you just decide, okay, we're already getting a lot of traffic here. We need to increase conversions. And then if you're not at that traffic level, you're like, I need to bring it to X traffic before I work on conversions? Or is it, I just need to work on conversions either way?
For us, it was like, we're going to do it all. If we're going to try to update that piece, so we're going to try to make it more educational and more informative for the people who are trying to get in. So get more people, rank for more keywords if possible. And then what are those things? And sometimes it's not even within the post or the blog or the article itself. It's things downstream that affect whether or not somebody is the landing page that they get on after it effective, is the download page they get on after being effective. And there's different things that we've done to sort of test around that as well, but it's not always just the single piece of content that's going to drive that.
Okay, awesome. So your checklist basically is looking at full funnel content refresh, right? So What are those kind of checkpoints like along the way when you audit content? What things are you looking for, and what things stand out as bad or at least not optimal?
For us, it's a lot. It depends on the actual article. So some are very, very, what we would call, it's sort of like they're already solution aware. They're looking to solve a problem. It's like problem answer blog post article. I need to do X, Y, and Z. The blog post title is how to do X, Y, and Z. So it's very simple, and those are much more transactional typically on those terms. If somebody's looking to do something and we can help you solve that, cool. That's awesome. And so the idea there is not to like bog down the post necessarily. It's actually to get them the information as fast as we can, versus another post that's maybe up top funnel that's more what you would consider like an ultimate guide, or like the higher level piece that you're going to sort of inform and go through. And one of the things that we've been doing on ours, it sounds simple, but it's one of our main checklists is like what comes next. So what I've been telling my team is what comes before. So these are our checklists. What comes before, which in our world is like, how do people get there? And the answer is either 2 things. It's going to be SEO, or it's going to be some sort of push internally, email, social, et cetera, et cetera. But if we don't know that going in, then why are we creating a piece of content? If we don't expect it to rank and we're not going to send anybody to it, why are we making it? Which I think
right.
a lot. I think
you don't have any way to distribute it, right?
I don't think anybody, there's a lot of content that gets made without asking that question. And then there's a lot of content that gets made without asking the next question, was what comes next? So you read this, what comes next? Are we sending them to a product? Are we giving them a free content upgrade? Are we like, how do we keep them there? How do we keep them interested now that we've helped them answer the question that they originally came for?
Yeah, no, I love that. It's like, it's two things, but it's basically, do we have a go-to-market plan for this, right?
Yep.
Do we have a way to get this in front of the eyeballs that care about this content? Yeah, and then where are we going to go from there, right? Like, is it just a dead end, or is there another way to open up this conversation, take it further, right?
Yeah, totally. And that's the thing, is like a lot of older content, like for us, we have posts from like 2014, like we have some old posts that are in there. And so like, that was not how blogging worked 8 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. Blogging was, I'm going to write a post, right? It's just, there wasn't that forethought put into it like there is today. And so we might have a post that, was ranking really high for some obscure term, but was like really successful. And there was never the forethought put in about what comes next. And so it's like, oh, easy, 5 minutes, add a download link to a product. Sweet. Now we're converting at X%. It's amazing.
Right. And so you're saying that next thing can just be your product a lot of the times, right?
Yeah.
And so to kind of walk through, and tell me if this is wrong, but to kind of walk through like what, and I hate this word, but like a funnel, like might look like for your guys' content, is you might have some ultimate guides or some lengthier in-depth content that's like, how to create a video. That's very basic, but right. And so like very top level, like, how to create a video. And then you'll have other like supporting content that's kind of that next step, that might not be as long or comprehensive, but it's meant to answer someone's very more specific problem of like, how do I do a screen capturing for free or something like that, right? And then you might say, okay, so for this, they're wanting a video, like their intent is a video. But to make sure that we're optimizing for the SERP, we might also put that video in a blog post, then it supports it. And we're also able to do the walkthrough steps. So you have this very like specific content that solves their problem. And they're also farther down the funnel, like where they're looking for something actionable in that search, right? And so like, it makes sense for that next to be, okay, well, you can download this tool, like our product that actually does this for you. And like, we have these instructions on exactly how to use it, right? And so you're being helpful, but the best solution that you're providing is your product, right? And it seems very simple, but also it just makes sense, right? Like you're answering somebody's question. And so I love that framework of just kind of like 1, 2, 3, and clarifying that not everything has to be an ultimate guide, right? Not everything has to be 6,000 words, right? And so let's make sure that works though. So like with that type of content, like, do you guys see good traffic and rankings from those shorter posts, those how-to posts? And is that YouTube or Google?
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes the answer is both YouTube and Google. It depends if we have the supporting video for it or not. But yeah, I mean, we've been shocked at I've been personally shocked at some of the results, because I think there was a push in content marketing. There was a lot of data around like, if you wanted something to rank, it's gotta be 2,000 words at least. And so then everybody's making these gargantuan guides and all these things. But yeah, if you're trying to create a piece of content that's just going to answer somebody's question, it's actually much more user-friendly. And I think this is why Google ends up rewarding these things in the end, to get a 600-word post that answers what I want right now, versus me having to like, okay, dig down do they have a table of contents that can link to the actual thing that I want? Oh, nope, they don't. Let me scroll to find what I was actually looking for, buried in that thing. And I think both can support each other. I think that's another thing from a content side. You can create the ultimate guide, but then take your ultimate guides and break out all those sections you had into individual articles that then Google can rank on. So if you've got a section within that speaks to a very specific topic, expand on a little bit more. Maybe you've only got 200 words in the section, but you can expand on that and create its own individual thing. But yeah, I mean, it's super simple. I just said this to somebody this morning, because somebody on my team was like, it just sounds so simple. We were talking about something else. I was like, yeah, it's simple, but it's not easy, because it's hard to implement sometimes and get rolling. But yeah,
Right.
if you have a podcast app, let's say you have something that somebody wants to record a podcast, it makes no sense for you to expand your nurture any longer than it needs to be. Because if I've come there and I'm looking to record a pod and you don't big old box in your blog post, we have the best tool to help you do, because you don't need to bury it. Like tell them how to get the tool. You help solve it. Download it today. It's free it's free to try. Get them in. Because then you most likely have a nurture series hooked up to your trial, or you have some sort of email thing hooked up to your trial that you can then use to move them along. It's not like they're gone.
Right. And yeah, to your point, I think if the content that you're creating is around high intent, right, and is around people that actually do want the solution and are in the market for your product, then it's not annoying, right? It's only annoying like if it's not relevant, right? And so I like that.
1000%.
I like that. And it just dawned on me, I think last week I was listening to another podcast, and it was Dr. Fio. I think you probably might have seen her stuff on LinkedIn, but her whole thing is basically product-led SEO or product-led content. And she said multiple times, you don't have to bury your product, right? Like it makes sense to incorporate your product throughout. It's not a totally separate content entity. Like the purpose is still to drive business and to sell your product. And so why shy away from it when it makes sense, like in the story? And it should make sense in the story if you're focusing on that kind of intersection of here's our product and like here are the things that we can solve with that product, right? It'll naturally come up and it won't feel forced. So, okay. So this has been great. And just like talking through that framework and how to think through content at different stages of the funnel. The other thing that I think content marketers can get bogged down with is channels, right? And so you're like, how do I create now this type of structure in each of the channels? And so how do you guys think about that through at TechSmith in prioritizing which channels you're going to focus on?
Yeah. Are you talking about specifically like, social, email, et cetera, like that?
Yeah. So it can be, social, email, SEO, brand content, sales.
Yeah. I mean, it's an ever evolving thing for us. It's something that's constantly changing. I tell Jesse, who runs our social, I'm like, sorry, like we're changing the social strategy again, or hey, I've got a weird idea that we need to kind of look into and figure out. But I think that is so true. It's just as like you can get bogged down with like trying to make so much content, you can equally get bogged down with like trying to be everywhere. So like we'll take me for example here. There's a whole bunch of people on the individual side on LinkedIn that also do Twitter. I don't do Twitter at all. Like I can't, like it's enough for me to just do LinkedIn and I can't do, and I know there's a whole bunch of people that are also doing TikTok and also like doing YouTube and also like, that's awesome. But I think what the biggest thing that I've started to learn, and again, I think even individual like LinkedIn learnings can pull into business as well in a lot of ways for people. Cause it's not that different. Just like I can't do everything, like I can't expect my team to be able to do everything either and do everything well. And I would rather do like 2 channels really, really well or 3 channels really, really well than try to be everywhere and it fall apart, because that's what will happen.
Right. So would you say, tell me if I'm wrong with this, but just from what I've observed, like that is probably organic search, YouTube, which is also searchable, and also Google. And like LinkedIn at the moment. And then you guys also have the podcast too. So those are kind of like the main pillars that I'm seeing. Does that kind of like line up?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and again, like I said, it's ever evolving. We're trying to figure that out. Cause I mean, we also have, we do webinars every month. We have a lot of stuff going on. And so I think that's one of the things for us is trying to figure out, we have a podcast, we have a weekly video show that ties into it. We've got YouTube content that goes out, blog posts that go out every week. So we're putting out a bunch of stuff. And I think that's one of the fun challenges as a content marketer is to say, how do I get that in front of people? And I think that's another huge gap. And it's a gap for me too, is like the assumption, and it ties back into old content, but like everybody sees what we do. And the answer is like 0.0001% see what you do. And so yes, you might have posted it on one social platform one time, but that also means, man, you should send an email and you should also put it on YouTube, and you should also get it over here if you can. I think the smartest thing that I've seen happen from a content side is taking less big pillars. So, we've got a podcast, webinars, etc. Like taking those and then try to break those out to their maximum capacity versus like, let's try to do all of the things at all the time. It just becomes impossible.
Yeah. And I like that this is basically stage like 2 of just your brand and how you think through content. So like first, like refresh what you have and like make sure that you can get something going, like something really working. And by working, we don't mean traffic. Like we mean, let's get it all the way across the line. Let's get actual customers from this, right? And not until then do you kind of go into this next phase of, okay, well, we still have a lot of content and we've kind of like maximized a lot of it. But there are ways that we can repurpose it and make it into a completely new thing, like a completely fresh thing. So how do you think through that, and how do you keep those fresh? Like how do you keep it from sounding boring? Or is it just the fact that you just know that not everyone has seen it?
Yeah, I mean, I think depending on what it is, like I just know not everybody's seen it, and also they might not have seen it in that format. So for instance, we've had a blog forever. We did original research on like the best, like a whole bunch of video stats around, how long should your videos be, all that type of stuff. And so we had a blog post for a long time that was how long should your video be? And then we just did a podcast episode about video length. And then we just did a webinar about video length. And we're going to put, and we put the podcast episode on YouTube. And so now you've got not just one thing where you're talking about video length, but you have 4 or 5 things where you're talking about video length, all in different formats. And I think that's the other thing to be cognizant of as a content creator is, you might want to watch this video on YouTube or maybe not, or you might want to listen to it on a podcast or maybe not, or you might want to read the blog post, or you might want to read the full research. I can't guarantee that what you want to do.
So we've talked quite a bit just about frameworks and when you update content, when you refresh content. So let's talk about how we actually get this done in a team setting. So just talk through kind of your current content team, who might be doing creation in different mediums, and then who's helping you with distribution.
Yeah, so for our content team, we have a group of writers, which mainly handle our blog. But they also do a lot of the social side from the actual content creation bit of it. And we have a content intern as well who helps us out there. And then we have a couple of video folks who are full-time and do a lot of our video stuff. And then we also have a full-time social media manager, and then a couple social media interns as well. So really our content team is housed around creating written content, video content, and then promoting and distributing all of that across from the social side, organic social.
Okay. So distribution is mostly social, it sounds like. But you guys do some email as well?
Oh, yeah. Our team, again, the way we're set up, we have a decently sized marketing team. And so we have other people who handle email. We collaborate with them. We have other people who handle brand specific stuff and promotions and all of that stuff. And so we work and do the webinars. And so we work with them. And it's a pretty collaborative effort as far as that goes.
Okay. And then SEO is obviously kind of a distribution channel as well,
yep,
right?
Totally.
So you do it right, you do the creation, and it should distribute itself, right?
Yep.
So those are kind of like the main forms of distribution. Okay. And so there's this kind of 80-20 rule that always pops up on social media, and you get a lot of people rallying around it. And it's basically this push against creating a lot of content and not having any strategy for what to do with it. And so they'll say, you'll spend 20% of your time creating content, and then you should spend the other 80% on distribution. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. What are your thoughts on that 80-20 rule, and how do you think about it?
I think it's not actually something anybody does. If I was or anybody that I've talked to, just because or maybe they don't talk about it. I'll say that. But right. I actually don't think anybody spends 20% of the time creating content in 80% of their time distributing. I just don't believe that.
Yeah.
And I think we stretched really, really hard into distribution over the last 10 weeks. And I mean, even we found it was like, man, we got to convince ourselves to like put some effort into distribution and what that looks like, because it just didn't feel like, oh man, is this what we should be doing? Because we were so used to like, what we should be doing is creating new content, is updating old content, which we should. But I think what you said is interesting there, where it's, yeah, you should be thinking about the distribution, even in this from the strategic level. Like that's where I love to live, is like, what's the strategy behind, what's the plan to get to where you want to go? Because if you're not even thinking about how that thing is going to work afterward, then it's just a waste of time. Like I talked about this on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago, but like, hope is not a strategy. Like, I'm not going to take this piece of content and just hope it works. Like there's got to be a plan. And again, that plan might be like, we're going to send an email to this list. We're going to put it out on social, on this platform, this many times. But one of the things we've been doing to try to like get to a spot where it becomes a little bit more formulaic is doing what we've called like distro docs. We're calling them distro docs, but like a distribution doc. So understanding like, and again, this is nothing fancy. It's a Google Doc with like, we're going to post on Facebook, we're going to post on LinkedIn, we're going to post on like, and then writing out the posts, and then they're available. Like it's nothing fancy, but it's like at least knowing ahead of time to say like, okay, for this blog, I'm going to come out of it with as much of that orange juice squeezed out of that orange as I possibly can. And then I'm going to schedule that out and see what happens. And what you're going to find is after you do 2 blogs, 4 blogs, 5 blogs, and you pull out all the good content out of that, and then you figure out and you like even just faux schedule it, you're going to get 6 months worth of content off of like 10 blog posts.
Yeah.
And you'll realize, holy smoke, like I don't need to have 52 blogs in a year. I don't need to. I can, but I don't need to. Like I can actually, if I'm properly distributing the content and the ideas, man, I might only need 15. Maybe.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was going to be kind of like a next question is like, how do you make sure that you don't go too far on distribution where you don't have enough new content that you're producing, or have you not even like approached that yet?
Haven't gotten there, and I think you won't know. And every business is different, every team's different. So I'll preface that with all of this is unique to your situation, and you will not know what's going to work until you do it and you execute on it. So and do it for a long period of time, and long could be 2 months, but like it's don't do it for 2 weeks and say, hey, I didn't get any traffic on the social content, because the other thing is your distribution channels could be wrong. maybe posting on Instagram organic where you're not going to get any views anyway is the bad choice. So like you have to be smart in terms of what you're actually doing there and what your expectations are going in. But yeah, it's definitely a unique scenario for each company in trying to figure out what you're going to do. But no, I think the answer is I haven't found any sort of detriment to it. And I think one of the benefits, even internally, that happens when you create less content is you stay on message. You repeat yourself. You repeat the messages you want your customers to know over and over and over again, because you're just refreshing and saying the same content, and you're not trying to be like, oh, well, I already said that 2 blogs ago. I got to say something different. I got to, oh, I already wrote that type of article. I got to write something else. And it's like, no, you don't. Like, you can just, you don't have to feel forced to like pigeonhole yourself into a situation where you're feeling like you got to create something new.
Yeah, I think that is really hard for content marketers, because I think if you're the one that's creating the content, it feels so repetitive. You feel like you're beating a dead horse. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that not all of your audience has seen that content, or it hasn't hit them in a certain way. Mm-hmm. Like one of the things that stood out to me that you said earlier was they might not have seen it in like the format that's best for them, right? And so like they might be aware of the blog post, they might be even aware of like the video, or they've seen it come across, but it just held no interest for them. But then they see, this Venn diagram that kind of like encapsulates like the blog post. And I'm using that example because we did this the other day. and it feels like a totally different thing. And this was a blog post that I had written, and then somebody else had looked at it, created this different, form of it in a social post that was fun, and that different types of people engaged with, right? And so you get the same people that engaged with the first one, and then you get kind of like this new group of people that wouldn't have ever engaged with the other one. So it's kind of like this compounding effect on one side, and then you're also bringing like new people kind of like into the fold with that type of content.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because what those distribution docs do, or if you sit down and you actually take one, like I would challenge people, take the last blog post, or to go back and like pull from my maximizer hat, like take your best blog post that you have and look at all the angles in there. There's probably tons of different angles and tidbits and things that, one sentence could lead to 5 or 6 tweets. One sentence or one paragraph could lead to 10 LinkedIn posts. Just depending on what it is. And so and that's kind of what I get at, where it's like, you're really not spending 80% of your time on distribution, like, because you can get so much more out of the content. And same with us, same with all of us. Like, we can get so much more out of the content than we actually are.
Yeah. So one other challenge I'll bring up too is, as somebody who's worked on like the long form side of it, but then also worked on the distribution side of it, you get to this fun but kind of stressful place of having too much content to distribute. And so how do you make sure that your audience like isn't fatigued, like not necessarily by the content like we're talking about, but just the frequency of how much you're posting, right? Because we got to a point where there's endless amounts of things that I could post per day, but it takes like processing time, as I call it, like to just literally process that long form stuff into the smaller things. And that's one thing. But then there's a point where you're like, it's too much per day, and it's going to get overwhelming. So do you feel like you guys have ever hit that point, or that there is kind of like a, non-optimal number of posts per day?
I mean, yeah, I think that exact pain point is what's spurred on all this conversation we just had before of like, why are we creating do we need all this content? We have so much. I can't possibly get it all out there. And I think one of the things that I'm starting to realize in terms of how to alleviate some of that is to focus on the purpose of the content. So if you and really look at it and say like, okay, do you need, are you doubling up, or are you trying, like for our SEO posts, like we used to post all that stuff also on social. And now it's like, the goal of that is search. Like if somebody's trying to type that in and find that answer, they're not scrolling through on social and being like, oh, I also wanted to know how to do X, Y, and Z. Like, no, that's not going to be beneficial. So that wipes out a whole bunch of cruff from our demand gen side of it, if you will. Like that's capture stuff. Like I'm trying to use that to like capture demand that's already there. And so that frees up a lot in terms of that. But then, yeah, like how much time are you spending on all of this, either top of funnel or like other types of content where you're trying to pull people in? And if you looked at it and you could say, how much of that do I actually need? And you might look at it and again say, well, I guess I only need 3 this month. And okay, then can I take those 3 pieces and cut those up each? Yeah, that's a little bit more manageable versus like, I think sometimes we don't get down to that granular spot. We're just creating and pulling and grabbing. And we got more and more and more. And I got a content calendar that I got to fit to. But customers don't care about your content calendar.
Right. Yeah. Or are aware of it.
No,
yeah.
No. Nobody cares that you publish every Wednesday at 2 p.m. and are looking for your blog. I can't wait to see it. Like, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah. So to kind of recap, because you said a lot of good stuff in there, to kind of recap, Google for capture, right? Like people that already have the intent are already searching for the exact thing that your blog is about, right? Social is kind of different, where, you really don't have very many people searching for keywords. Like that's just not how you use the platform. But it's more inspiration, scrolling, whatever captures your attention. So you have to rely more on brand and copywriting to kind of get people to consume that content. So you think about social more for your top of funnel content. Is that right? Okay. And then brand content.
Yeah, I was gonna say again. It wasn't. It's not an original thought to me. I'm gonna give full props to Andy Crestodina over at Orbit Media, because this was something that I heard him say at a conference one time. It was, there are two different type of people. There are searchers and there are scrollers, and those are two different types of people, and those are two different types of content that you have to create. And that was really eye opening, because I think for me for a while, and probably a lot of content marketers, you're trying to do it all at once. You want to create a piece of content that's going to rank, but also, be interesting on social. And those are really, really hard things to do. And if you can separate them, it makes it a lot easier to figure out, like, okay, if somebody does want to share this on social, awesome, but that's not the goal. Or if this post ends up ranking somewhere, amazing, but that's not the goal.
Yeah. And sometimes they're the same people, right? It's not like I only use Google or I only use social, but I am using them for different purposes, and I'm probably looking for different answers, right? Even if it's around the same subject, like I'm either at a different point in my journey, or like I just need a different type of format, right? And so depending on like what type of person that you are, or at least what type of person you are in that situation, then either of those could be the right answer at like the right time. So, okay, cool. So I'm like sort of wrapping up here now, but I think this might be a good closer to kind of bring it all together. And it's also totally selfish because I am starting a new job next week, heading up content. And so I thought kind of a fun thing would be to ask you what you would do for your first like 30, 60, 90 days. Because it really is tricky, I think, for marketers, for all the reasons that you said of, we have, some existing content. How do you go through and audit and understand where you are and what you can do with that content versus creating new content programs? So how would you think through, starting your first day, or really your like first 3 months as a content marketing leader? And you can even go back to your your first 60, 90 days at TechSmith.
Yeah, I think because I've been at TechSmith for over 10 years now, and so like I've sort of evolved my roles and throughout doing a bunch of different stuff with content. And so, but I did take over the blog before I took over, content at large. And so I think how I would start, and again, I already talked about this, but how I would start was to look at what's currently working and come in and look at that company and say, okay, what do you have that's currently working? And then try to reverse engineer that. Why? What are the topics? You probably got a few really good topics. And so I would say, okay, topic A, I'm going to try to either come up with some sort of cluster around topic A or topic B and try to come up with a cluster around that to start to at least see what I could do from that side and to grow that content. Because that's content your audience is clearly already saying they're interested in. And so, and after that, the key with that though, is then also understanding what we talked about with like making sure that you do have a through point to either some sort of conversion or, a through point to revenue to understand like, is this actually working? Because the last thing I'm interested in is like vanity metrics and getting page hits. Like I could care less if I get 1 million page hits if nobody converts off that.
Right. So you need to have an attribution model kind of in place, right? Of being able to track it back to customers rather than just traffic. So that would be high on your priority?
Yeah, I think. And so one of the first things I did when I took over the blog was I built out a dashboard in Google Studio, and I tied in GA and all the analytics into it. And I put out, I literally would send a screenshot to like leadership and say, here's the update on the blog. Here's the update on what's happening. Here's how the content's working. Here's how it's performing. And, we would actually build out plans around that because, I don't want to have to try to create content based around things that aren't going to work. And the more that I'm kind of in the weeds and understanding what's actually working, that could drive some actual decisions down the road in some way, shape, or form, as far as things with product or things with market choice and where we're going after. And so, yeah, I think being able to actually see what's happening and say, okay, traffic's here, traffic's from these, channels. Are they up? Are they down? Having a real pulse on what's happening there, and then conversion rates as well, and understanding like, okay, these are the goals that I think are important. Is what I want to do actually having an impact? Because that's what it's going to come down to, as like building a content team and trying to understand. It's all going to come back to like, well, how is this actually impacting the business?
Right.
And thankfully
Revenue.
some of it's, some of it's branded and you just got that trust with it that it's working, you know what I mean? And it's not all performance based, but with some of the stuff, it absolutely can be performance based. And when you show that, it allows you to free up and get buy-in for other things that you also think are going to work.
Okay. So this is great. So Google Data Studio, I'm familiar with. So that's by the way, like free tool for people to use by Google. It basically helps you to create reports. It pulls in data from like a number of different apps, but Google Analytics, and then do you use like Google Search Console?
Yep.
As well. Any other like apps that you pull into that kind of a report?
Those are the main ones I would use. I mean, there's SEMrush things. It depends on what tools you're going to do and try to pull that in. We typically would look at that data somewhere else. But yeah, I mean, and again, I still look at GA at a separate view, and I still look at Search Console within Search Console and get that data. But it's just nice to have these things set up. So if anybody has like a quick question, or as we go into planning, we can say, which blog should we update, in the next 10 weeks? It's like, oh, scroll. And I can get a very fast, quick look at like, oh, traffic is down here, conversions down here, ding, 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 like red dot. In the dashboard will give that to you versus you trying to hunt through like sheets and sheets and sheets of GA to try to figure that data out.
Yeah. And usually they're just like, 3 or 4 main metrics, like leading metrics that the leadership or, whoever you report to is going to care about. Right. And so just being able to have those things at the ready. And like you said, literally a screenshot that you can send them. Okay. So, so you would, set up a reporting attribution. And then you also talked about performance, like getting, performance content channels going before, so that you can earn the right to kind of do maybe more of like the brand or long-term content. So what kinds of content do you consider? And this like varies depending on the business. So you can just talk to how it works for TechSmith, but what kinds of things do you think of as performance channels versus, more brand or long-term channels?
Yeah, I mean, for us at its most simple, it's like SEO is like a super easy performance, because there's like things I can actually look to give you data on an attribute. So I can say like this post ranks for these keywords and gets this much traffic and converts at this rate. So those are very easy things that I can actually pull data on, versus like I launched this podcast episode, X amount of people listen to it, but I got this amazing comment. Harder to prove that.
Qualitative.
Yeah, like harder to prove that sort of stuff out. But yeah, and I think different companies are going to have different challenges with what they're trying to do. Some companies are going to be able to crush on brand, and it's going to be maybe a struggle to do the SEO side. Other companies are going to could crush SEO and going to struggle on brand. And so it's not like you have to do performance to prove out brand. You might be able to do brand to that while you're trying to build up the performance side over here as well. It doesn't have to be that cookie cutter.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that's kind of interesting about podcasting and the webinars is the people that you invite on as guests. That's pretty easy to track on the back end too. Like I've been surprised, like seeing people that are invited on as guests or that have attended, that we can see them like come through as customers. And so like, oh, like I like they were just on the show, right?
Yep.
And so they actually can be pretty easy to track that way. You can't bank on, that's not the point of it, right? And to reach like more people. But that has been kind of like a nice side effect that I've seen like from those channels, and that are pretty easy to track. And then the other one, so social, like have you found like social to be easy, hard, in the middle to track? How do you feel about that as a performance channel?
So I personally don't love like organic social, I'll say, as a performance channel. When I started, we really tried to like hook that in and figure that out, because that was my background, was like performance SEO, like I said. But organic social is just such a different animal, and it's changing all the time. So for instance, if you would have said organic social 6 years ago, Facebook would have been amazing and you would have been able to get tons of play there and it would have been awesome. Well, fast forward to now, it's kind of a dead zone unless you're going to pay money to do it. And so like, that's where and then it becomes really, really hard because then the question is, okay, do I want to pay to get somebody to click on my blog post? It's like, I don't know. I don't know that answer. It could be yes, but it also could be wasting money if there's no, again, especially if it's just like they click, they read and they bounce. Like, okay. And so I don't love it as a performance channel. I love it as a brand building channel. I love it as top of awareness funnel and then helping like nurture and on the customer education side. So I love social for like people who are already customers, like being able to interact, reach out to them, help them. We do a great job with that on our social team of, that's a whole other ball of wax outside of the content marketing side of social, but like the interaction with customers and interaction and giving them support, help, and all of that type of stuff that comes with social on the organic side, because they're not, people are going to find your Twitter handle, your company Twitter handle, if they have a question, and they'll just reach out to the company. You know what I mean? It's a lot faster than putting in a support ticket a lot of times. And so those are the spots where I see social being really, really effective, is like, using our shows, using our podcast, getting that content out and letting either people who aren't aware of our products know that we're here to help them, but then also people who are definitely fully aware of our products and in there, help them get better. That's our goal.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's a good way to think about it too, because it's impossible to completely measure it. And it's like you said, scrollers versus searchers, right? Like you can't treat them exactly the same. Like you can have the same content, but it's a different consumption, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, so going back to 30, 60, 90 to kind of recap. So you're going to make sure that we have attribution in place, right? To be able to make decisions and like track everything and have that data. You're going to make some sort of report, and that could be in Data Studio, that could be somewhere else, but you're going to make some sort of like report so you have a better kind of like at a glance view of it, both for yourself, but then also for the leadership team and maybe for your own team too,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can easily show which things are effective and also like just get people excited about what you're doing, because that's going to help you when you do need to launch new programs and like maybe new channels, right? And so the reporting helps with all of that. Is there a way that you capture that qualitative data when someone does have just like something positive to say, whether it's an email or a comment? Are you keeping those for your reports as well?
We do keep those for reports. We also have, for us internally, we have a Slack channel that's just dedicated to that kind of stuff. So if anybody across our team sees something, we'll throw it in there and just say, hey, just so you guys know, we got feedback on the podcast, or hey, just so you know, we got really good feedback on this webinar, and here's what somebody actually said about it. And those things go a long way, because then it's stick in your brain of like, oh man, that webinar. So like the next time we want to like say, should we do a webinar? It's like, yes, we should, because I remember that awesome comment.
Right.
But yeah, as far as like being able to share that out with the team, that's also a very, very key thing that I would say. And it's something I'm super passionate about, is like, yeah, it's cool to share that out with leadership and obviously get buy-in from them, and even, leadership within the marketing department. But within my own team, to get them rallied around the idea of like what's going to work, because everybody wants to like drive towards something that's actually going to work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like the more context that you can provide your team of what's working and why and how, like that has been so eye-opening for me. The more that I can give my team, I don't want to silo all that information into my brain and try to get that out. The more that they know it, and the more that they can have those conversations with other people in the department and other people in the company as well, that's great, because then they understand why it is that we're trying to do what we're trying to do, and they're going to create better content. They're going to try to look at the things in a different way. We've all at some point in our careers probably been just thrown over something, like do the thing, like write this blog post, and you're like, but why? Like, what's the goal? Like, I don't get it. And so like getting your team on board as to like the why behind what you're actually trying to do and the tactics you're trying to do has been super, super key.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think like we have a similar channel and we use it for similar purposes, but having, something dedicated to content wins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just the whole team can just feel good about what you're doing, right? And like about their individual contribution too. Like as somebody who started as an at an agency where, you know, I'm creating content, and maybe the client is excited about it, but oftentimes you didn't see what happened to it after that. And like after time, like that can like weigh on you, and because you crave like what little data you do get back. And so that was actually one of the reasons that I like moved into in-house, because I was like, I need to see it all the way through so that I can get better. Like it's hard to get better when you're not seeing the results of each of the things that you're doing. And so anyway, so I can see that from both standpoints, internal and with leadership, but then internal with your team too, and growing that way. So you're doing all of that and just making sure that you can measure everything, right? But then you're looking at what's working, and then you are adding maybe clusters around that, or just expanding on that topic, whether that's search or social. So those are some other things that you're doing. Anything else in like the first 90 days that you would make sure that you're doing? Like, are you talking to customers, or like who are you talking to make sure that you are coming up, you know, with new content ideas, or that you understand what type of content to create?
Yeah, I think definitely talking to customers is key. Talking to other people within the org is key. So understanding, like from a sales perspective, like what do they care about? What content do they need? What, you know, from us on like a customer ed side, like how can we collaborate and work together? So understanding how you can collaborate around content is also important, because I think one of the other, you know, we haven't touched on it, but one of the other things that's super key is like nobody cares that your tech support team wrote one thing and your content writer wrote another thing and your sales leader wrote another thing. They just know that your company wrote a thing, and they're looking for help. And so I think like that's another really eye-opening thing, is like the more that you can get aligned, and there's like everything's content. So like a support article is content, a YouTube video is content, you know, a tutorial video on your software is content. And all of those things add up to being useful for potential users and current users. And so I think making sure all of those things are aligned, and just having those people talking to each other is so key.
Yeah, no, that I was kind of laughing there, because it reminded me of another post I think that you did that was kind of like how you see your content and how your customers see your content. And it's really like in our minds, it's like very organized, and like this goes here and this is totally different than that. And like, you know what I mean? But then for a customer, it's the exact opposite. It's like, this is just like a bunch of content from XYZ company. And yeah, they don't see it as siloed or necessarily organized. And they shouldn't have to like think through how to find that content, right? And like how to like, it should just be obvious, like where to look for what they need. And so I kind of think that if they're not thinking about that, that is a good thing, because it should just be like a seamless user experience. But internally, like there should be like a lot of like organization around that and why behind it. And so the last thing I think I wanted to touch on just with this whole 30, 60, 90 days is with talking to customers and with talking to the sales team. I think like the big light bulb for me was like objections. Like everything goes back to like the customer objections. And if you can fit that into your content, or even make content around like a specific objection, then that's really helpful, because ultimately you're trying to sell a product or have like a business result. And so if all of your content is just top of funnel and is shying away from the product and is never totally answering the question and is dancing around the question, or it's not addressing and thinking about what those follow-up questions are, then it's not complete, right? Like it's your funnel, your content funnel is not complete. Like you've talked about, you know, the educational stuff around the category, and maybe you've talked a little bit like about the problem and potential options, like maybe including yours. But if you're not thinking about what those follow-up questions are and you don't know what they are, then they're still not going to buy because they still have questions. And so I've just found, talking to sales and talking to customers and finding out what are those follow-up questions, right? And like, what are the things that are preventing them from buying, that those can be baked into even organic content. I think we think about those things for landing pages, and we think about them for paid content, but there's no reason that they they can't be used in organic content as well. And so that took me way too long to figure out. But I think like once you realize like, oh, like people want the answer to this question, like it might seem salesy to us or it might seem too forward, but if enough people are asking this question, like let's just publish it somewhere. Like let's make it either like a web page or a blog.
Yeah, I mean, so I can actually tell you a pretty good example of that. So like you said, we make Snagit and Camtasia, and they do very similar things. So they both can record their screen, but they can't both capture their screen. And one has an editor, full-on editor. The other has a little bit of, some video trimming stuff in it. And so it's like, which one do I need? And that was a question we would get all the time. Which one do I need? And so what did we end up doing? We wrote a blog post, we made a video, we made a landing page, like we made all of it. And it was like trying to answer those questions and trying to figure out, okay, rather than dance around it and try to say like, well, we hope you can figure out what the differences are. Nope, we're going to just answer it, tell you exactly which one you'll need based on what you're trying to do. The answer might be one, the other, or both, depending on what you're trying to get done. But yeah, I think that's a very interesting point in terms of like, as content marketers, we tend to be focused more like upper funnel, mid funnel. But if you're driving a bunch of traffic in and then not knowing what's happening afterward, like that's a bad place for a content marketer to be, is to be bringing in traffic and not understanding what's happening. And so I think the more that you can know as a content marketer and as a marketer in general, in terms of like the impact that what you're doing is actually having, the more successful you're going to be.
Yeah, no, I love that as just like a closer too, because that kind of just like wrapped up all like the last hour of stuff that we just talked about. Because it really does come down to whether it is your first 3 months in a job or it's like your first year in a job, like wherever you are, like you should be constantly auditing and assessing what you have, and you should know what's working and what's not working, and have parameters for what constitutes as working and not working. And just to recap that for everyone, I think that's for leading indicators for content. I think a lot of times it is traffic if we're looking at search, or it is consumption. Like I love that as a leading indicator of, okay, they got there, right? Like we drove people there. Did they stay there, right? Like did they sign up for the download or for like the newsletter after that? So those are kind of, are they going deep into the content? And you can kind of look at that. But then also, are they going so deep that they become customers? Like, or were they only ever, looking for that education? And then what was the objection? What was the thing in the way? So again, like thinking about things full funnel, and then going from there, when you are deciding what to do next. And I think having a really good understanding of your customer, and of your product, and kind of like where those things intersect. And so one thing that I'm learning, and I can say for the listeners here, is where are they in awareness? Like, are you a commodity product? And there's nothing wrong with a commodity product, but I think you have to understand if you are, right? Does your solution already exist? Are there other people selling, a very like similar solution? Like, or is this kind of like a very disruptive thing? Because that's really going to affect your how you're going to go about content, because you can't create demand that's not there. You can't capture demand that doesn't exist. And so you might have to back up and create that demand. And you might have to say, okay, this person is problem aware. I think most people, if you solve a problem, and you should, otherwise you probably shouldn't be at that company. You should, number one, make sure that your product solves a problem. But that might be where you start, right? Is like your customers are problem aware, but they're not solution aware. And so how do you get from that point to the next point so you can get them closer? And I think that for me has been like a really big turning point too, of like, where are we now? And it, again, goes back to your kind of like 2-step program of like, where are they now? And like, how do we get them to next? So figure out where you are now. And then figure out how to get them to next, right? Like figure out how to get them interested in in consuming more of your content and have some sort of call to action. I think you've said one time, like, just not to shy away from call to actions. Like, if you are providing useful information, like, make that useful information easy to get to. And then again, like, it's a loop. So then go back to the audit. Like, you should be constantly auditing and constantly looking for ways to both refresh your content and repurpose your content. So is there anything else that I missed or that you wanted to make sure that you said on this show?
No, I think you covered it. Those are all really, really good things and really good aspects. I think the main thing I would say is, it's so easy to look at what other people are doing in the content space and try to think like you've got to do that as well. And I would say, like, the one thing about the audit, and that's why I preach that, and maximizing what you currently have, is it makes it really, really internal. And so I would say, before you try to do what some other company is doing or your competitors are doing or any of that, like, don't get distracted by that stuff. Like, look at internally at your company and at your audience and how you're trying to solve problems for them and add value to their lives, and just keep doing that and do that in different ways and then iterate on that.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect way to close it out. Is ultimately it just comes back to your product, your solution, your company, and everything else is a distraction, right? Everything else you're going to have to, like, retrofit somehow to make it work anyways, different circumstances. So it's best to just look at what you already have going on. So okay, so for this last part, just where can people reach you? Where can people find out more about you and about TechSmith?
Yeah, you can absolutely find me on LinkedIn. I'm there all the time hanging out. You can just find me at Justin Simon. And then as far as our content, so if you were interested in learning more about getting into video and understand video, we have a weekly video show where we talk about all things video. I'm going there from the sort of newbie perspective, but then we also have, two guys, Andy and Matt, who have been doing video for a long time and can help you actually get way better at doing video. That show's called Video Workflow, and you can find that at techsmith.com/video workflow. And then our weekly podcast is the Visual Lounge. If you're interested in learning about doing images and videos better at work for training and tutorials and all that type of stuff, you can check out the Visual Lounge as well.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Justin. This has been basically a masterclass for me in how to go about a new job in content marketing, but then also just how to think differently about content, how to repurpose, refresh, rather than recreate the wheel every time, which is just not sustainable. So thank you so much, and hope we talk soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Content Logistics. This episode was produced by Motion, a done-for-you B2B podcasting agency for busy marketers. If you liked what you heard, please follow the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.